Hi guys, Pippi Pets here. How are you? It's been a while, right? I haven't posted anything in a few weeks. I'm sorry. Um, it's been a really rough last few weeks, and I wanted to check back in and say hi and let you guys know what's been going on with my little dog Zoey. She's my long-coated Chihuahua. Um, you might have seen a video I had posted a few weeks back where I had discovered some lumps in her neck, and I had taken her for testing. So I wanted to kind of tell you what's been happening since then. Zoey didn't make it. Zoey was sick, and I had to put her to sleep last week. It's been a week. It was on July the 25th. I had wanted to make a video sooner, but I just couldn't. I've been a bit of a wreck the last week. Excuse me for a moment. Can you be quiet, please? I'm making a video. Thank you. Zoey had cancer. It looks like she had lymphoma. And it looks like she also had congestive heart failure as well. And she was really, really sick the last day. And you know, her health had been going up and down for the last few weeks. But I did have to make that decision at the end. And, you know, I had been waffling back and forth on, you know, as her health would intermittently deteriorate and then appear to improve, I was waffling back and forth throughout, you know, what should I be doing? You know, like, should I be putting her to sleep? Is she that sick? And the challenge was that I didn't have a definitive diagnosis, right? We had run several tests, but for whatever reason, I didn't know for sure whether she had cancer. And of course, if you don't know for sure, you're always questioning, you know, well, is my dog going to get better? Or what if I do this? Or what if we treat her this way? Or maybe she just needs time. Maybe she just needs, you know, to gain her strength back. And it's been a really, really rough past few weeks. So the reason why I'm making this video is, like I said, I wanted to kind of give everybody, let you know what happened. But also, I kind of need to make this video just for me. It's not following any of the format that maybe I've used in some of my other videos. You know, there's no spectacular video footage of anything. I mean, maybe the other footage isn't that spectacular to begin with, but you know what I mean. It's really just me talking today, and I need to tell you about her. I need to make sure that her memory is not forgotten, because she is, or you know, she was a really, really good dog. I'll never find another dog like her. And you know, the last few days, I've been like, you know, it depends on the day. Some days I'm like crying all the time. And then some days I'm not. And I've never been through this with a dog before. I've never had a dog that I've you know, gone through its end of life process with, and it was quite a learning experience, but also unlike anything I've ever been through before. So I thought maybe I'd just tell you a little bit about Zoey, and then tell you a little bit about some of the symptoms I observed in her towards the end. And maybe, you know, I've had some of you have asked me for more information on how, you know, her health has been or was, because maybe your dog isn't feeling very well right now. And if that's the case, I certainly hope that they, they feel better soon. And, I'm not a vet. I've never claimed to be. I'm not. But I did learn some things from this journey with Zoey, and I still have Bruce. And of course, I'm not thinking about that. I don't even want to think about that. I'm scared to think about, the fact that he won't always be with me. And I'll, probably have to go through a lot of this again with him for a second time. But, if my experience helps to add to at least your knowledge, if your dog is not feeling well, then, I'm happy to share some of that information with you. But yeah, Zoey was 10, and part of my hesitation, towards the end I wasn't hesitating, but earlier, part of my hesitation was thinking, how can my dog be so sick if she really is sick, when Chihuahuas are supposed to live for like ever. Chihuahuas live like 20 years. They don't all live that long, we know, but Chihuahuas are the longest living dog breed, and she's only 10. There's no way she can be as sick as you think she is, I mean, I wasn't in denial in a way that it would cause me not to seek the appropriate medical attention for her, but in my head I'm thinking, like, how can you be so sick? But she was 10. I actually got Zoey when she was a year and a half. She was the sweetest little puppy. There was a really, really nice family, who had given her a wonderful head start in life. A really, really good family, and unfortunately they couldn't keep her, and I was looking for an adult dog because I didn't want to train a puppy. I wanted an adult dog. I was being spoiled. So I responded to a want ad, an online want ad. Actually, she was in a totally different city from me, quite far away from where I was located at the time, and it was a toss-up between her and a few other Chihuahuas. But when I had spoke to the owner ahead of time, and when she had said that she was housebroken and litter box trained 100%, so she could go outside or she could go in the litter box like a cat, I was just blown away. I've never heard of that before, and I thought, I gotta have this dog. That's really good. Versatile. So I went, and I remember walking in, and I looked down, and this little blonde colored tiny dog is coming. I don't want to say slinking up to me, that's the wrong word, but she had such a submissive personality, but she was friendly, so she comes kind of with her head bowed, and she's coming apprehensively up to see me, and I remember crouching down and gently patting her, and she just rolled over, showed me her tummy and wanted to be pat, and that was her personality to a T. She was so submissive. She was so, so sweet. And so obedient. Like, Zoe was like the best dog I could ever ask for. Like, she was perfect. There's been so many times since then, I think to myself, how did I end up getting led to this particular dog? She was perfect for me. The minute I saw her within 5 seconds of her coming up to see me, I said, this dog is for me. I love her little personality. She's so sweet. And this sounds so stupid, because I don't like to talk like this, because I just don't. But, I really believe she was my little doggy soulmate. I know she's not a human. That's not what I'm saying. But, everything about her personality that I could have asked for in a little doggy friend, she had. And I had such a little connection with her. It was, she's my dog, man. She's so I knew I had to bring her home, and the lady you know, that had done, her and her family had done such a great job at raising her, and they were really upset. I remember when I was leaving with her, she had to leave the room because she was crying. She couldn't bear to see her go, and, you know, I kind of felt bad, but I absolutely now appreciate the pain she must have been feeling, because I couldn't bear to see Zoey go either. But I brought her home, and she was in her little carrier. Sorry. She was in her little carrier. She was crate trained, and she sat in the front seat with me on the long way back. And she just, she was a good dog. She wasn't trying to get out. She wasn't anything. She was just, laying there, and wasn't sleeping, but she was so well behaved. And she fit into my home life perfectly. She loved everybody. She was sweet. She was gentle. She was everything I could have wanted. And I'm really, really glad I found her. I think about what if she never crossed my path. What would my life have been like if I didn't have my little friend with me? The thing about dogs is they become part of your family, and they don't live very long. And how do you say goodbye to this little being, this little soul that you just look at her and you know what she's thinking. She just looks you in the eye, and you can communicate with her. You know what she's feeling. You know what she's thinking. You can read her facial expressions. You can read her body language. She doesn't talk, but she does. And how do you, even when you know it's for the best, even when you know the dog, you want to save them unnecessary suffering and pain, how do you, you do it, but bringing yourself to knowingly end your dog's life is it's horrible. But she was a really good dog, and I loved her. I have so many pets. Not so many, but you've seen all of them. I have a few pets. And I have another dog, Brucey. He's a short-haired Chihuahua. He's smaller than her. He's like less than half her size. Zoey was about 6.5 pounds. But, and I love him to death. And please don't ever tell him I said this, because, I don't want to hurt his feelings. But Zoey was my favorite. She was my favorite. I love that dog. So I think this actually started, the beginnings of it, I think started about 2 years ago. I noticed I had put Spot on flea medication, the normal stuff you get from the vet. I had put it on her, and she had diarrhea for like 3 weeks after that, and she was vomiting as well. And I was told, she's just having a reaction. It'll work its way out of her system, and it did. But she couldn't tolerate flea medication. Maybe it was about even 3 years ago this started. And to be very honest, I have never really put flea medication, like flea preventatives, on my dogs, because I'm not comfortable putting that on them. It's an insecticide. Well, they've done tests, and for the most part, most dogs don't suffer ill effects. I really don't totally believe that. I really think in some way, shape, or form, there has to be a negative impact. You're pumping all of these substances into your dog's system that wouldn't normally be there. So I think my first sign was a few years ago when she stopped being able to handle the odd time I did give her that medication. She couldn't handle it, and I was not able to use feed preventatives with her. She'd get a reaction. I think the second clue I got that I didn't totally tune into then was that about a half a year or so prior to all of this, there was one day I remember I had been out that day and I came home and I was getting their food ready and I looked down at her and she looked so sick. Like, just the look on her face, like she looked like she was on death's door. And I'm like, what the heck is wrong with you? But she got better the next day. And I thought, well, maybe you just weren't feeling well. And I never thought anything of it again. But you know what? In retrospect, I should have. Because I should have had like full testing done on her. And I didn't. And I feel, there's a part of me I feel guilty about that. At the time it didn't dawn on me. I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Did you eat something bad or, but when was it? It was about 3 months, 2.5 months ago maybe. My dogs have always scavenged the floor around my parrot cages because if you have birds, parrots toss stuff out of their cage, including food. So she would always be looking for, food that she could eat, vegetables, fruit, whatever came out the other side of the cage door. But sometimes, if I had given my birds seed, there would be some seed hulls on the floor, and I'm always really conscientious about cleaning up their mess, 1-2 times a day. I'm vacuuming everything, but sometimes, I just can't get to it quick enough. And once in a while, Zoey, she would have this coughing fit where she'd, then, at the very end, sorry for the visual, but, she'd get to the point where she'd cough so hard that she'd make herself gag, and then she'd vomit, like a clear, bubbly solution. Sometimes it was a little yellow. So this time around, when she had, she was coughing for a few times, and I thought that it was because she had swallowed a seed hull, and she's trying to clear it out of her mouth. But then after, and it didn't happen very often, it just once, maybe once every 3 days or so, I'd be holding her, or she'd be sitting beside me, and she'd be right up against my head, and I could hear her breath. Like, it would be... But it wouldn't last very long. It would only be a little while. And I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, why are you breathing heavy? Were you just running? Like, well, but then I wouldn't think too much more of it. I'm just like, oh, maybe I wasn't paying attention and you just jumped off of somewhere or whatever, But I think that was actually the start when she was starting to display symptoms of heart issues. But I didn't even know that those could be heart issues. I had no idea. So either way, some time went by, maybe a couple weeks or so, and she stopped coughing. Like, the intermittent coughing stopped, and I thought, okay, great. You just haven't been chowing down on seed hulls by accident lately, because I had also stopped giving my parrots seeds on purpose for that time period, because I wanted her, I'm thinking, well, she, for whatever reason, they seem to be getting, she's scratching her throat, so let's just not give her the opportunity to accidentally eat one. But then, which is when I made that video about her, I noticed she had the lump on here. And of course I had been doing my research, and the first thing I thought of was, oh my goodness, my dog has lymphoma. I didn't at that time really totally connect the two symptoms, although I was thinking, well, maybe, something's lodged in her throat and it's getting infected. Maybe it is a seed hull lodged in her throat, and it's, it's been there for a week or two and it's starting to swell. Anyways, they did the fine needle aspiration It came back inconclusive. They couldn't find cancer cells in that lump that she had here. If I'm not mistaken, she did show slightly elevated white blood cell count, but her blood panel was fine. All her liver, her liver, kidneys, every function appeared to be working normally. And so, she did have also over here was swollen as well. So, we said, okay, well, maybe she's got an infection and of some sort, so we tried the antibiotic route. I didn't want to try the antibiotic route, to be very honest, because my experience with her thus far had been that she did not react well to medication, at least the last few years. And ultimately, it's my decision, right? But I said, okay, let me try it. And I waited a few days after coming back from the vet and after finding out her results of the cancer test, I guess. And I waited about 5 or 6 days, but in that time, she stopped eating of her own volition. Like, let me rephrase that. She stopped eating her normal food. At the time, I had thought she wasn't eating because my dogs are on a raw diet, and I buy the raw patties are like they're pre-processed. And sometimes you get a batch and you open up the bag and it smells different. And I think it's just because the ratio of ingredients is a little different. I think they have more organ meat in some batches than others do. And historically, if that has happened, she'll take one sniff. I mean, she's always been a really fussy eater to begin with, but she'll take one sniff of this off batch. There's nothing wrong with it. It just smells a little different, and it smells like organ meat, and she wouldn't eat it. It'd take her like a day to get used to it. So I thought, okay, well, you've gone off your food for a day, because I do have another one of these weird smelling batches. But she never went back on her normal food. And so, a day, normally a day, I wouldn't worry. Even 2 days, I wouldn't worry, because she's done that in the past, because she's so fussy. But now 3 days have passed, and I'm like, Zoey, why are you not eating? So I'd give her treats, or I'm cooking her like different food. I went and bought lamb chops. I cooked it for her. I cut into little pieces for her. She'd eat the treats. Towards when, the beginning of this, she was eating. She'd eat a whole treat. She'd eat multiple treats. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? It's fine. I just need you to eat because you're not eating. But during this time, she was also starting to vomit. And she was vomiting like bile. It's yellow mixed with clear stuff. She was vomiting that. And I'm like, why are you throwing up? And then it started getting, where she even wasn't wanting to eat the treats, and she wasn't wanting to eat the, the food that she didn't get every day. I've always fed my dogs human food, but the treats, the steak, I'd make her a steak, she won't eat it. And the thing that changed also, and I kind of at this point attributed it to maybe, the vet checked her teeth. Her teeth were not in bad shape. She didn't appear to have any ulcers or tumors or anything in her mouth. But it's like she could only chew on this side and her back molars. Now, she had a bunch of her front top teeth previously pulled. So at first, when she seemed to be having difficulty chewing, not even chewing, just the whole process of it being in her mouth, I thought, well, okay, maybe it's just you're having a hard time because you don't have top teeth. But in my head, I'm thinking, this has never stopped you before. Like, you would never know you didn't have top teeth before. But it got to the point where I'd have to cut her food very, very small. And it started where I'd have to cut it small, and she'd only eat if I offered it to her by hand. And it was only a little bit then. Like, let's say meat, like a piece of beef or something. But then I got to the point where she wouldn't even really touch that. And I'm talking like really, really, really small bite-sized pieces I was giving her. And sometimes I thought, well, you're only always chewing on this side back here. Is it your mouth is sore? But then sometimes I'd see her chomping on this really hard treat, the odd time she would eat it, And it's really hard and abrasive, and she's going at it, you know, on this side. I'm thinking, well, if your mouth is sore, I mean, maybe it's not consistently sore, or is it? She was really, I really didn't know what to do with her, you know. So anyways, after about 5 or 6 days, I said, you know what, let me try the antibiotics, because I don't know what's wrong with her. She's not eating like normal. So I had her on one antibiotic, I can't remember the name, and she continued to vomit through this time. I had her on for like 5 or 6 days. And because she kept vomiting, I should have called the vet sooner, but I knew that one of the side effects could be vomiting. So I thought, well, I got to stick with it, because if she really has infection, I got to clear it up with the antibiotics. The vet gave me a different brand, and I tried that. I tried it for one day. And after that, she was continuing to vomit. And I said, you know what, this isn't doing anything. I don't see any improvement in this dog. Even if her energy level was increased or she looked happy, I wasn't seeing any of that. So I stopped. My concern was also, am I stopping the round of antibiotics? You're supposed to finish it. But the vet said, no, if she's, at this point, we've tried it, no, just stop. So I did. But then she started having seizures. And, they started as small seizures every, 3 or 4 days. They weren't like those seizures where, there's a lot of shaking. Her seizure was she'd go like this, and her eye would go like this, and she wouldn't even necessarily fall over. Her front paw would start raising up, and it would be, and I'm like, what is going on? Why are you having a seizure? So she had a couple of these seizures, and I ended up taking her to the emergency vet. It ended up being a weekend. Of course, this always ends up happening on a weekend when you have animals, right? So I'm taking her to the emergency vet, and, by this time she really wasn't eating. She wouldn't eat, and she was starting to get aggressive with Bruce, but I think it was because the poor thing was just starving. And this was my conundrum. I'm like, you're looking at me. I know you're hungry. I can see it in your eyes. She was excited by the thought of food. She would come when I was getting food ready for Bruce, she'd come. She'd wait there. She wanted food. It's just something in her little head. Once she tasted it, she didn't want it. I guess maybe she was nauseous. So she was getting aggressive with her food. But I don't think it was because she had cancer, a brain tumor. I could be wrong. I think it was just because she's starving and there's another dog in the house and she's protecting her food. That's what dogs do. But anyways, so, based on her symptoms, no eating, the vomiting, the increased aggression, she was urinating more. She was drinking more and she was urinating more. He said, based on my experience, it sounds like she has lymphoma. And, the other thing was all 6 of her lymph nodes, there's 2 in the neck, 2 in the shoulders, and 2 in the back legs. They were all swollen. And he had said, I've never seen a small dog that has all 6 of them swollen at the same time. And in my head, I'm thinking, I just took her off the antibiotics. If they were doing anything, maybe they were not strong enough. But, when I started them, she only had 2 swollen lymph nodes. Now she's got 6. How did that happen? So this doesn't sound like it's a bacterial infection that we're dealing with. Anyways, so he gave me, he said, here's your options. I can give you epilepsy medication. It's just a Band-Aid solution. You can take her for cancer testing and chemo. But considering she doesn't do well with medication, that may not be an option. Or he said you can euthanize her. I knew by the way he was talking, though, that he didn't feel she was going to get better. And at that point, she looked not so good. So I decided, I took her home, and, I didn't start her. I did take the epilepsy medication. I can't remember what the name of it is. I took it, but I didn't start it because he also gave me Valium, the liquid Valium. And he said if she has a seizure over 5 minutes, give it to her rectally because it will stop the seizure right away. Don't let it go over 5 minutes. I'm glad he gave me that. You know, because she had a few other seizures, but then one night she had the worst I ever saw. I didn't know that they can go unconscious, because up till then she wasn't going unconscious. But this one was a bad one, and I guess she did go unconscious. I thought she was dying in my arms. She was lying on her back, and she's just drifting in and out of consciousness, and I'm like, my dog is dying in my arms. When she was having a seizure, I think it was a grand mal seizure, and it was starting to go longer than I've ever seen any of the seizures go for. So I gave her the Valium, and it stopped it in about a minute and 30 seconds. And so immediately the next day I went to my normal vet and I said, you got, I didn't notice any vomiting or diarrhea from the Valium I gave her. Mind you, the Valium made her, the seizures as it is, I guess it's part of the, if you call it the post-drome phase, I can't remember what you call it. But, she was so out of it. Like, she'd be looking at me like this, and she couldn't keep her balance. She was kind of banging, not head first banging into walls, but, she couldn't walk a straight line. She was kind of banging into things, and the Valium made her, like, really spacey, and it made her spacey for, like, 2 days. But I thought, you know what, let me go get the pill form to see if I can give it to her as a preventative, because I think we can deal with that side effect, because I can still, she still is eating the odd treat. So I did, and I'm so glad I went and got that, because it stopped. I gave it to her for 3 nights, and she never had another seizure since then. So I think it was just the seizure kept cycling in her system, and she just couldn't get past it, and she needed that extra help to get past it. So I'm glad I did give that to her. But after that, actually I can't remember exactly when, but the vet, no, it was before that. It was about a week before that. The vet had given me, it was when I first went for the biopsy. The vet had given me a prescription canned food and a syringe. And even before these seizures had started, I had started feeding her with the syringe. So I was getting a little bit of food in her, but not enough yet. She was hungry still. She wouldn't eat. And anyways, I kept thinking, well, maybe she's having the seizures because, sorry. Guys. Shh. Shh. Thank you. Maybe she's having the seizures because her blood sugars dropped so low because she's hungry. I didn't know. But anyways, I kept at it, and after a while she got sick of that prescription diet, and I went and I just got her human baby food. I got her like a beef and broth formula. Excuse me for a minute. Guys, I can't hear myself. It's too noisy. Those are the parrotlets. They're happy. Please be quiet. Shh. Okay, that's not even working anymore. So I was feeding her baby food, and it was trial and error at first because I didn't know how to effectively give a dog food using a syringe, but after a while we caught on to it. And so gradually I started being able to get more food into her every day, and the seizures had stopped, and she started getting her strength back. And I'm thinking, maybe it's just because she wasn't hungry. She wasn't eating. So, I did have to feed her, depending on the day and when she wanted to eat, like 3 to 5 or 6 times a day. Because usually at each feeding, she'd only eat between like 3 to 9 milliliters of baby food. But she started what seemed to me to be getting better. It seemed like she was still drinking a lot and peeing a lot. But, she got her strength back enough that she could jump back up onto her beanbag chair. She could jump off on good days. She wasn't hiding under the bed, which she had started when she was having the seizures. as much anymore, if ever. You know, she stopped fighting with Bruce. And so I was starting to get hopeful that, you know, my gut knew there was something wrong with her. But I was starting to get hopeful that she was getting better. So the weekend before, actually a week and a half before I had to put her to sleep, I remember picking her up and I was holding her, and you know when you have a cold and you're towards the end of a chest cold, and sorry to be gross, the phlegm starts to break up and you can hear it, it's loose in your chest. It almost sounded like that when I picked her up, and I'm thinking, Zoe, why are you breathing like this? And now that I had thought about it, she had intermittently this whole time, if I picked her up a certain way, it's kind of like she had a hard time breathing, but and I thought, well, you know, maybe you have a cold, you know, and I'm constricting your chest too much when I'm picking you up. But this day that I did it, I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound so good. And so, I took her to the vet the weekend before I put her to sleep. And the reason why I had also taken her to the vet that weekend was because she had developed this bump over her esophagus. And it was like, it was squishy. It was so soft. It was like, not even spongy. It was soft, but you could tell. It's like there was fluid in it. And I'm thinking, oh, you poor thing, it must be also pushing on your, you know, your windpipe. So I took her and we decided to do x-rays. Long story short, the x-ray was an abdominal x-ray, and it showed she had an enlarged heart. So my vet said, you know, an enlarged heart, before, when we had the fine needle aspirate done, the vet had discovered she had a grade 2 heart murmur, which she never had before. So when I took her for the x-ray, the vet said, you know, an enlarged heart usually ends with congestive heart failure, but she couldn't hear her heart murmur this time. But what, you know, the x-ray did not show any masses in her organs. Her organs seemed to be fine, but there was one identified blob behind her esophagus. We didn't know what it was. So, you know, the vet gave me a diuretic. You know, in the event she starts, you hear that rattling sound again, which in my experience, not with animals, but, you know, I know when people are nearing the end of their life, you hear a rattling. I know that. I've heard it. It's like they have fluid in their chests and they have a hard time breathing. You know, she gave me this. She says, you know, it'll help. The label on the bottle said for congestive heart failure. And when I saw that, I knew, you know. Anyways, I took her home, and I didn't use it because I never heard that rattling sound again. But she took a turn for the worse later in the week. You know, guys, she took a turn for the worse later in the week, and the 2 ways I knew was she peed on my bed. So Zoe, since all this illness started, she had had an accident maybe about 4 or 5 times. And Zoe never would pee outside of her litter box. And I knew she was sick for her to have an accident like that. That was not her. And she had never, ever peed in my bed, ever. And so when I saw this, I'm like, oh, you know, my heart sank. I'm like, that's not a good sign. Because, you know, dogs don't like to soil where they sleep. They don't do that. And her breathing was quite heavy. You could hear it. It's like, you know, and she was breathing quickly. And the sides of her rib cage, you know, like she was exhaling and having to push from her abdomen. And I'm like, this doesn't look good. She didn't have it the entire time, but, you know, Long story short, she never really got better after that. And so last Sunday on the 25th, she had the breathing. It was fast again, you know, it was deep. It wasn't deep, I think it was shallow. And she had to make a concerted effort, you know, to exhale. And I could hear her breathing. She didn't really want to eat. I mean, she had not really ever wanted to eat since all of this started, but she had learned to accept me giving her the food via syringe. But this time, I could tell by the way she turned away, she didn't want to eat. And the other thing I had noticed that had changed in like the last day was her posture. I've never seen that dog with her tail between her legs. But the last day, her tail was kind of in between her legs. And when she would stand, her head would hang down, and her stomach, her abdomen had started, it was so gradual, but her abdomen had started to be enlarged. And because she was so fair, and she had hardly any hair on her tummy, and it was blonde, I could see the color, you know, it was starting to look bruised. And her spay scar was starting to invert. So it was the swelling was starting to cause it to be pushed outward. So I took her that evening to the emergency vet, and I'm thinking to myself, part of me knew, you know, if you take her tonight, this is the last time you're taking her anywhere. But part of me was still hopeful. I thought, well, maybe, I knew she wasn't getting better, but I thought maybe they can give me some medication to help her. And so I remember thinking, I was driving her there, and she was in the front seat. I never let my dogs in the front seat. They always have to be in the back. And I remember thinking, this is so ironic. Our trip home from your first home, the first day I had you, you were in the front seat, in the same posture, lying on the front seat. And now this is probably the last trip I'm making with you in the car, and you're in the same spot, in the same position. It was just, but they put her on oxygen. They came out and they said, she's not oxygenating well, which I knew would happen. Otherwise she wouldn't be breathing like that to begin with. And they said, we want to put a catheter into her vein in the front leg in case there's an emergency and we need to give her some emergency medication. And I mean, I'm not saying that's not true, but I know what they're thinking, right? I don't think they wanted to say it to me, but I knew they thought they would need to put her down. And that's how they do it, at least at this vet. And I knew they weren't saying that, but I knew that's what it was, so I said fine. But they did offer an ultrasound, and I said yes. It wouldn't take too long, and I just had to know what was wrong with her, because up till this time, I didn't know what was wrong with her. To see your dog be sick, but you don't know how to help them is heartbreaking. To see your dog not eating the way they normally do, but they still have an interest in food and they still want food. It's heartbreaking to see your dog like that. And one thing I didn't realize at the time, but in retrospect I realized it, is when the vet came out after they tested, she said, come into this room and we'll talk. And the room she took me in is I guess the room they use as the euthanasia room. It's got its own door to outside, and there were 2 or 3 other examination rooms, but I didn't get called into those. They were empty. But so she said, normally if a dog has congestive heart failure and their lungs are full of fluid or their heart is full of excess fluid, when you listen to the sound, it sounds like crackling paper or crackling plastic, but hers doesn't sound like that. Hers sounds hollow. It sounds like she's underwater. She said, so when I looked, she does. She has fluid not in her heart or in her lungs, but in the chest cavity all around, she said it's so much like her lungs are floating. And then she said, you know, her liver is an odd shape, and I can see dark masses in it. And she has, I think she called it fusion. She has multiple pockets of fluid in her abdomen. So, you know, I said, oh, what can we do? And she said, you know, really, ultimately, there's nothing you can do for Zoey. If it was just the abdomen, she would have given her prednisone to try and shrink the fluid pockets. But because her chest had fluid in it, they would need to drain it, and the surgery would be invasive, and she didn't believe that she would make it through. And I totally agree with her. She wouldn't have. So the only other option was to put her to sleep. So I agreed. And they gave her a sedative first. I held her the whole time. I held her the whole time in my arms. And I got a lot of pictures with her. I said goodbye to her. Even though, you know, I had been saying goodbye to her in my own way for weeks before that, there's a difference when it actually comes that time and you actually do have to say goodbye. And you know this is like the last time you're going to hold your dog. But they gave her the sedative first, and it kind of, yeah, it was a sedative for sure. And then a few minutes later, they came in and they gave her 2 vials of drugs that ultimately, right, it stops their breathing and stops their heart. And once they did that, it went really quickly. You know, like, it really seemed like within 5 to 10 seconds, her heart was not moving anymore. And you know that I had gone through that scenario so many times in my mind, preparing myself. You know, what it'll be like if I'm holding her and, you know, she passes in my arms. They're so loud today. But the thing I had not thought about was having to leave her there. And I couldn't leave her. You know, she looked like she was sleeping. Of course, you know, she's not there anymore. But she looked like she was sleeping. And I tried quite a few times to get up and leave. And I couldn't do it. I kept coming back and hugging her. But what, you know, after a while, what kind of dawns on you that they're gone, and now it's just the shell. She got cold. I was surprised how quickly she gets cold. She got cold. But after a while, you know, you're hugging this little thing and there's no life in her eyes anymore, and she's cold. That was really hard, but I got her cremated. I'm waiting for her little urn to come back. I got her a nice brass urn. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with her remains when she comes back. To be very honest, I know it's my dog, but it's kind of grossing me out, the thought that I feel bad saying that, but that her ashes will be coming back to me. But I don't think I can bring myself to scatter them, because then she's really gone. And maybe I'll feel differently later, I don't know. But I'll deal with that then. But I'm waiting for them to call me back. It should be any day now. But I wanted to tell you what happened. That's my story. I've spoken for a few minutes now. More than a few minutes. And if you're someone who's going through a similar situation, or you've recently had to put your dog down, you know, if your dog's with you, I hope they get better soon. And if you've had to recently put your dog down, I'm very sorry. This past week I've been just a wreck. I mean, today is the first day that I feel like I could even just talk about it without bursting into tears, because up till now, like you know, I have my moments where I feel okay, like, you know, the logic kicks in and you think, you know, it's a new day, you can move forward, she's gone. You did the best for her, you didn't let her suffer, and that was a kindness, even though you know it's a kindness, but it doesn't change the fact that you took your dog's life. But, you know, this past week I've been a mess. But if you are trying to make the decision, of course work with your vet, but people said to me, you'll know when it's time. And because I'd never been through that before, I understood what they meant, but I had nothing to relate it to. But you really do know when it's time. The reason why I had been waffling back and forth up until last Sunday was because it wasn't time. But when she took a turn for the worse, I knew. You do know. But in retrospect, because there was actually one time a few weeks prior to that when I had scheduled a euthanasia date for her, I ended up canceling because she seemed to be getting better. But in retrospect, if I had gone through with it then, well, yes, I wouldn't have ever known for sure if she would have gotten better. Knowing what I do now, she wasn't going to get better. And so, you know, my belief system is that when animals die, they're gone. They don't go to the Rainbow Bridge, or their spirit is not living elsewhere somewhere. They're just, you know, their life force is done. They don't exist anymore in any dimension or any realm. They're gone. And if I had done it earlier, it wouldn't have hurt. Sometimes I feel guilty that I didn't do it a day or two earlier. And I can't change that. And I feel very guilty about that. So if you're one of those people that's not sure whether you should or not, of course you know them best, and your vet can help you, but it's better to let them go a little bit earlier than a little too late. I don't think it was too late with Zoey, but it wouldn't have hurt if I had done it a little earlier either. So thank you very much for, if you're still here listening to me babble, thank you so much for listening. I might do another 1 or 2 videos about Zoey, just, you know, with some pictures or some old footage of her. I do have footage of her actually being put to sleep. I don't have the heart to look at it, so I haven't seen it yet. And I don't know if I'll ever have the heart to look at it. I may post that, I may not, I don't know. But I will go back to posting parrot videos. I will go back to my old type of videos that I post, but I just had to talk about Zoey and how great of a dog she was, and how much I loved her, and how much I will miss her always. She was the best dog I could have ever have asked for. So that's that for today. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will see you soon. Bye.